when do we delineate between your intuition being something that is telling you the right thing, or your intuition is anxiety and self-doubt and self-sabotage?
Well, those things are not intuition. Those things are emotional dynamics based on confusion and trauma.
But sometimes you have anxiety reflux in your gut.
Oh yeah, it shows up in the gut all the time.
It comes up here.
It shows up in the same area, but it doesn't feel the same. Like when you have a strong gut feeling about something, there's a kind of certain knowledge about it and a certain degree of ease about it.
Yeah.
When you're having a strong emotion, there's usually perturbation and tension around it. So I'd say that on the body level, you can tell the difference about what you're experiencing inside. So the spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle, who lives in Vancouver like I do, he says, and I've learned a lot from his work, he says somewhere that emotions are the body's reaction to the mind, whereas gut feelings are the body's reaction to the external environment. So that without gut feelings, animals don't survive, do they?
Sure.
And human beings evolved in nature. And for millions of years and hundreds of thousands of years, until a blink of an eye ago, we all lived in nature. So gut feelings were essential for survival. And they just tell us, is it safe, is it not safe? Emotions are more complex, and emotions are very much affected by what we believe and our perceptions and our past dynamics. And so they're not the same as gut feelings. So it can be confusing, but when I work with people on this question of gut feelings versus emotions, I just direct them back into the body and say, let's see what's the body experience here. If there's a gut feeling, there's going to be a kind of a calm knowing about it. If there is a strong emotion, it's going to be tense. That's the big difference.
Got it. So when it's self-doubt, self-sabotage, I'm not good at this, I'm not worthy, you know you're going to fuck this up, you know this isn't going to go well. That isn't your gut talking. That's your anxiety talking.
Not at all. That's your anxiety talking.
So even if you feel it in your body, that's something else, though.
You're always going to feel it in your body because emotions are literally physiological things. There's no mind-body separation, you see. It's not possible to have an emotion without your body being involved.
What's a tool people can use to determine what part of their body's talking to them? Because sometimes when I woke up this morning, my lower back was hurting, but that might just be my back telling me I'm old.
It could be a number of things. Could be that you have a bad mattress. But
sure, that's what I'm saying. How do you determine? But this is a key.
Well, if something is chronic, it keeps showing up. There's usually something going on. Interesting, you should mention back pain. There used to be a back specialist here in New York.
Yeah.
His name was John Sarno, S-A-R-N-O. He's no longer alive. He died not that long ago in his 90s.
Right.
And Larry David and a whole lot of other people swear by him because he was a back specialist. And he saved thousands of people from back surgery because he pointed out that their chronic back pain was a result, as I would also say, of unresolved emotion, particularly repressed anger. And so that muscles tighten and blood supply gets cut off. It's not that the back pain was imagined, but that the source of it wasn't the physical x-ray findings or mechanical, but repressed emotion. So somebody with chronic back pain, I'd want to talk to them about what's happening to them emotionally. And Sarno, who's written a number of books, and a lot of very famous people swear by him, his point of view was much the same as mine. The difference is he was a back specialist, I was a general physician, so I looked at all manner of illness and all kinds of chronic conditions as related to people's emotional lives. He specifically looked at people's back pain, but we came to the same conclusion. So if you had chronic back pain, I'd want to talk to you about what's going on in your life.
You're a trauma expert, and one of the things that I think is so interesting is that you not only talk about personal trauma, but you've also been very outspoken about political trauma.
Oh, yeah.
When we think about politics and what we're seeing right now in the United States and in the Middle East, how would you diagnose what's happening and the trauma that has happened in the Middle East, in that region, in the United States' involvement in that region?
I've said this publicly before. I went in my bed till I was 13 years of age. And when I was 8 years old, or 9, I remember my mother taking me to a psychologist. And the psychologist took a history of my infancy and early childhood. And I remember him saying this. I was in the room when he said this to my mother. And he said, "Ma'am, if the only problem, based on what happened to him as an infant, if the only problem this boy has is that he wets his bed, you'll be very fortunate.
Oh, wow.
Now, as my family could tell you, that's not the only problem I had.
Sure, that was the beginning.
No, I first visited Gaza in 1992, 1991, in the West Bank. In 2004, there was a study of Gazan children that appeared in an international psychiatric journal. If anybody thinks that history began on October the 7th, 2023, they need to know this. In 2004, there was a study in the Journal of Psychiatry about Gazan children. This is 2 years before Hamas took power in Gaza. 2.5% of those kids had no traumatic symptoms. A large number had severe post-traumatic symptoms. They wet their beds, like I did. They were aggressive towards their parents, died in nightmares, depression, anxiety, based on the collective trauma that has been imposed on the Palestinian people in the name of my people, the Jewish people. And then I visited the West Bank in 2022 to do a workshop, a trauma workshop for young women being tortured in Israeli prisons. And the mass torture of thousands of Palestinian prisoners has been documented by Israeli Physicians for Human Rights, by B'Tselem, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, by the United Nations, by all kinds of other international humanitarian organizations. This is all before October the 7th, 2023. So the Palestinian people, now there's no arguing about Jewish trauma. I mean, my people were horribly traumatized, as the whole world knows, as they should know, not just in the Second World War, but of course even before. Now we've transposed that trauma onto the Palestinians. We continue to. And in my adult life, in my conscious life, I've never seen anything as horrible as what is inflicted on the Gazan people right now, and on the Palestinian people. It's almost every day that some Palestinian kid gets killed by Israeli forces, not in Gaza, in the West Bank. It's never reported in the Western press. So what's happening is a horrible collective traumatization. I recently wrote a foreword for a new book by a Palestinian psychiatrist, Dr. Salma Jabbar, and she used to be head of psychiatry for Palestine. And I wrote the foreword for her book, which is coming out very soon. In her book, Dr. Jabbar writes, how do I diagnose and deal with the suicidal depression of an 81-year-old man who comes to me with this suicidal depression because the home that he built with his own hands 20 years ago, now they're forcing him to demolish with his own hands. What do? Give him Prozac? So what we're talking about here is an almost unprecedented, massive traumatization of a whole people which is cheered on by the West and not even reported on a daily basis. It's the worst thing I've seen in my whole life. It breaks my heart every day.
I grew up in Northern California. During the War on Terror, and in the Sacramento community, there were a lot of Afghani refugees that came and Iraqi refugees that came as a byproduct of the Iraq and Afghanistan war.
That's
and
right.
A lot of those kids were teenagers or even younger than me.
Yeah.
And they came from deeply traumatic experiences from war. And I would oftentimes think to myself, well, where will the trauma end? How do we fix this trauma, or how do we heal this trauma? Based on the work that you've done and what you've seen, are you optimistic about the future? What can be done so that this trauma does not continue or the trauma is healed?
When I was in Palestine 3 years ago, and anybody wants to, there's a film called Where the Olive Trees Weep that's available online, right, where I'm briefly featured doing this particular workshop with traumatized women. But when I was there 3 years ago, and just to give credit where credit is due, I was there because of the support of Israeli Jewish psychologists. So there were Israeli Jews who wanted to help the Palestinians and wanted to help this healing work to them. So I'm not making this a Jewish versus a Muslim or Jewish versus Palestinian issue. I'm making this a human issue. Human beings on both sides. Unfortunately, one side wields all the power and has intentions that are nefarious as far as I'm concerned. But I was told that there's no post-traumatic stress disorder here because the trauma is never post, it's ongoing. And it is. That film that won the Academy Award, No Other Land, for Best Documentary,
Yeah.
which shows the daily assaults on the dignity and the possessions and the lives of Palestinians by Israeli settlers and Israeli army in the West Bank. You probably heard that the Palestinian director was attacked a few weeks ago, lynched basically, outside his own home, and then arrested by the Israeli army for protecting himself from these settlers. So how do you heal trauma in the midst of the trauma? It's almost impossible.
For me, is I want, and my intention and my prayers always is an end to suffering.
Yeah.
And I have had a very tough time in my spiritual practice to try to reconcile the suffering that one experiences in their own life, but now the information overload that you feel.
Yeah.
And so much of adult life and modern adult life is witnessing and making sense of profound injustice.
Absolutely.
And human suffering. And I had this really powerful conversation with my dad, and this is why, I know he'll be listening to the podcast because they watch everything. I give them so much credit. They did their best and they gave me everything they possibly could.
Yes, they did.
But my dad said something that was just so beautiful that stuck with me, and I'd love your take on it. Is he says, and this is what helps him sleep at night when he watches the news and sees everything that's happening, and he sees the injustices that are happening around the world in many regions around the world, is he said, he goes, Hassan, I notice your generation is obsessed with this idea of justice, of absolute justice. But he says that's going to be impossible in this physical realm. Absolute justice is only possible in the hereafter, in the spiritual realm with God. And that helps him go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And I've found some profound truth in that as well. Where how do we even do the Microsoft Excel accounting of all this suffering and trauma that humanity has endured?
It's a beautiful statement by your dad.
Yeah.
Except I can't go there because I don't have a worldview that gives me an afterlife. Okay, so let me give you my secular version. Secular version of it.
Sure.
So this morning I'm reading the Guardian newspaper. It's about Ukrainian young men who enlist for the war to protect their homeland. And this one Ukrainian young man says, when somebody kills your brother, don't you want to take revenge? When somebody wants to steal your land, don't you want to fight back? Now, we write that about the Ukrainians, but we don't write that about the Palestinians. Even though they're defending their land, and they have been. And they've been killed in large numbers for decades now. Profoundly unjust. Now, how do we deal with that? Well, there was a great Jewish sage that lived about 100 years before Jesus. And he said about the task of healing the world. And he said, the task is not yours to finish, but neither are you